Hi, dear one. I have really wanted to come on here and share something. It's just been a wild time, like in my world and also in the world. And so I want to take this opportunity. I was feeling inspired, I was feeling motivated. And so here I am. I wonder how things are in your corner of the world. I wonder how you've been taking care of yourself. And please let me know if there's anything exciting or big or overwhelming that you might be going through that might be supported by our community here. And so I wanted to share some updates, some insights that I've had in the last several months. Can't believe it's already been several months. And I think a big part of it revolves around my recent 20-year college reunion that I was able to be a part of. I went to a small private liberal arts university, and it was quite a journey. I like to refer to my class as pioneering guinea pigs because we we were the first graduating class, and there were a lot of things that we did for the first time ever. And there were a lot of things that were done to us because everyone was trying to figure out how to establish a university. And so, in preparing for this reunion, I felt compelled to invite someone to go with me. I didn't want to show up alone. And I think that's actually been something that's shown up for me this year. I haven't really gotten to the heart of it, but I move forward. Maybe, gosh, now, maybe over a year ago, I actually asked my twin soul, I was like, hey, we're going to have a reunion. Would you be willing to go with me? And at the time, he said, yeah, like I'll go if all everything lines up and everything works out. And so that was sort of the first step over a year ago. And so, as time passed by and got closer, I think it was May, a few months ago, when he followed up and he was like, "I bought my tickets. Here they are. So if it works out, I'll see you there." I'm like, "Okay, that's great." And then we sort of went for quite a bit of time, not really talking. There was a lot of changes. There were a lot of changes going on in his life. And I think I was shifting kind of internally and really trying to support my well being. I think trying to manage some anxiety that was coming up for me around the State of the Union and the state of the world. Um, and so really turning inwards because I think that was really all that I had the capacity for. And so, that was going on for me in April and May. Um, and I was, seeing progress, which I was really proud of, finding ways to identify some beliefs that I had around thoughts and emotions. And, even one of the things I recall was this belief that my thoughts had a life of their own and that I wasn't allowed to interrupt my thoughts. And so when I was able to identify that, I tried to I tried to shift, you know, um, my belief and be more intentional. And so I would try to stop, these thoughts that I was having as a fearful response to what was going on. So as, I'm working on supporting my mental and emotional health, there were also these events that were going on virtually to prepare, sort of, get us engaged before reunion. And I surprised myself by volunteering to support the efforts of the reunion committee. So I thought, if I'm volunteering, it's important for me to show up as well. So all these things are sort of just happening all at once as they usually do. And I attended a couple of discussions, kind of thinking about the university, thinking about its foundation, thinking about the hopes and expectations, maybe ideals um, that everyone who was a part of founding it may have had. And so a week, a week before the reunion, someone in the reunion committee reached out to me and asked me if I would give a speech. And it's funny. So I thought about it and I tried to write something and I wasn't satisfied with it and tried to write another version a couple days later and wasn't satisfied with that. And I remember thinking, like, gosh, if they gave me an hour to teach a class, I would have had something. But for some reason, 5 minutes did not feel possible to write or draft. Well, 5 drafts later. Um, I just wasn't able to come up with something. And so it was Wednesday night. It was the night before my twin was going to arrive at the airport. I was like, do I have anything? And I didn't. So Thursday morning, as I was driving to the airport, I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to wing it because there's no time. I have no more time. And I didn't want to take away from, the time that I was going to spend with him and then the time I was going to be at the reunion. And so, in atypical fashion, it kind of also speaks to my update and where I am. I just had to let it go. And I don't even know if I trusted that it was going to be okay. All I knew is I did not have the headspace to figure it out when I was hosting and sort of spending time on campus and in the reunion. So I surprised myself. And I also was trying to keep it a secret. So, other than my twin and maybe one of my close friends who also went to school with me, and the reunion committee, I didn't. Oh, maybe there were two friends, one who was close to me and one who I was connecting with. Um, so I'm trying to just piece it all together. But I'll say that the reunion was a homecoming for me. I wasn't able to draft, wasn't able to write a speech that I agreed to read, but the process of trying to come up with something had me reviewing my entire life. So, not just the last 20 years, not just the 4 years that I was there, but even before that, right? Like all the things that sort of led to me showing up there and maybe some of the lessons that I hadn't learned yet. And so it took about 24 years for me to feel like campus was somewhere safe, that my classmates were people that I trusted and cared about, but also the me that I am with them, and also in general, just the me that I am, right? Like coming home to myself. And so it was a big deal for me to say in front of everyone when I did my speech, the theme is reconnecting and refreshing through timeless friendships, to say to them, for me, this is more than friendship, it's a family. It was quite a transformation. And I realized in the 10 years since the last reunion I attended, it gone through this remarkable and really unimaginable journey of healing personally and subsequently in connection to my relationship with my classmates and to the school. And so, that was a really huge moment. I remember being on stage giving the speech. And as I was finishing, it felt like a commencement, right? Even though I graduated 20 years before, this commencement sort of was the end of 24 years or maybe even longer of running from myself and maybe hiding myself from those around me, specifically my classmates and staff and faculty and my community. And it felt like the beginning of, well, now that I see like this as a home, now that I see you as a family, starting this new era, really grounded in myself and really centered in myself and willing to be seen and thus willing to see everyone else. All of this is again, a lot of work, a lot of sort of showing up to events each year. And, I realized too that as I was doing work to heal and feel more comfortable in myself, it became easier to have meaningful connections with anyone that I was meeting in the community, right? So whether those were current students or other alumni, I realized in the last 2 years, as I've become more comfortable and more trusting. And I'll also say that the last 2 years have also been me in the fourth floor or my fourth decade of life. Um, this really, this coming home to myself has made the connections and the people who've come into my life more impactful and more profound. And so, there's this overall theme of homecoming, of allowing others to see me, especially those who I had spent a great amount of time hiding myself from. And so after the speech, I remember this like relief and like just a letting go and enjoying myself. And so like the pool party was wonderful and I love being in water. I love swimming. It's like home to me as well. So I'm having like this double home like experience. But, speaking in front of them was the first time other than graduation where I'd been in front of my classmates. So even, confronting that fear and asking my twin, like, hey, by the way, I have this fear of the deep end. Like, how are your swimming skills in the deep end? And um having the support of him and my other friends and their family, um, I was able to tread water and spend over an hour in 7 feet water in an Olympic sized pool. That was fun. And apparently, I'd never jumped into a pool because I'd always just like kind of step in or like walk in. And so my twin was like, I think you should jump in the pool. I'm like, okay, I'm going to jump in the pool. And then I guess people were diving off of the diving board. And he was like, you want to dive off of the diving board? I'm like, no, I'm cool. Like, I just confronted 3 fears. I think that's enough for the year. Um, as someone who does not often enjoy or ever before this really enjoy challenges. Maybe just the things that like I had to do, like if it was a challenge, but really never being intentional about um confronting like fears and challenges. So that was really special for me um to have these moments and the support to be able to say, okay, I'm gonna try it, see where it goes. And it's fun too, because maybe in the previous month, I was doing these workouts at home, just people that I found on YouTube, different channels. And, they give a couple of different options of things that we could try. So like fast feet versus high knees, and I was also in the practice of trying to identify like things that felt good or things that I was enjoying. And I remember for the first time, like thinking, like, challenge feels good. And the first time I thought it, I was like, is that real? Like, am I really thinking that? And it was. And, the more that I did it a few more times, I was like, yeah, like challenging myself does feel good. And so I think getting into the pool, doing the speech was a point for me to assess and see, like I'm seeing the impact of challenging myself and it does feel good. So that was like another wonderful part of the reunion was seeing that. And then, gosh, I mean, there are so many like moments that I was grateful for throughout the entire weekend, but there's a part of campus where they host, special events. And I feel like every time I'm there, something happens. And, the after the swimming, there was time to, like rest and get ready for a semi-formal dinner and sort of a party afterwards. And that actually, before we get to the party, there's a cocktail hour, and two of my dear Pisces classmates, um, we were really excited to come together because we hadn't been together in a long time with the bonds and the connections, right, that we had been forging the last year and a half. And so we're like together and we're like talking, and it's almost as if everyone around us kind of disappears. And we're like sharing personally, like something going on. And then the other two were affirming and acknowledging and sort of channeling messages. And it was just very wonderful experience. And then they were trying to like move us and they were trying to get us to dinner. And, we were being corralled, but we sort of like snuck off into a nook with a mirror. And that was sort of like my moment. And it was so sweet because in the 4 years that I've been on this like twin soul journey, I often feel like people don't understand it. And there's a lot of judgment and a lot of misunderstanding. And I have come to be very selective in who I talk to about it. And it has felt very lonely, right? And but because these two sisters of mine also have cultivated and are cultivating their spirituality and, their spiritual practices, I think we all may have had our own version of a twin soul or twin flame. And so one of my sisters kind of started it by saying, I can see why you refer to him as your twin soul. And she had told me, that you have the same twinkle in your eye and you get excited the same way. And I was like, oh, like it was so affirming to hear that. And then my other sister, she said, out of all of the men that I've seen you with, sounds wild, but the two or three that she's seen me with, she said, like, this is the most embodied that I've seen you. And again, it was just so affirming. And I think it's often the case where I may be doubting, like, is he really my twin soul or am I really on this journey? And I know the journey isn't about the other person. It's about me. It's about my spiritual awakening. But it was so beautiful to have it acknowledged that the connection that I have with my twin can be seen and understood once sort of like there is an understanding or an acceptance. And so it was really healing to receive those messages from them. And so, we have dinner and then they give us the option of dancing or singing karaoke or, having hot cocoa. And I can't say no to the dance floor, especially, like we're right in front of it. And so, like, go to the dance floor and start dancing. And we're just moving and grooving, to the music. And there was just this beautiful moment of three favorite moments on the dance floor where I saw one of my classmates' daughters with a spouse who I didn't recognize. And the spouse wasn't as comfortable on the dance floor. And so I took the daughter and started dancing with her. And as we were dancing, there was another daughter of one of my classmates. And so we had them join us. And so we had like 6 or 7 of us like dancing and I was sort of leading them and like, okay, let's like come to the middle and then let's pull out and like, let's turn to the left and let's like rush to the right. And I just had so much fun with them. And it was such a special moment that like they trusted me and their parents were like open to having me like dance with them. And, I would check in with my twin later, and he said, like, there was just so much pure joy, like, coming from that circle, and everyone could feel it, outside of the circle. And I was like, oh, it was so beautiful. And it was like, it was, it was blissful, like the purity of that joy. And so that was like the first significant moment on the dance floor. The second one, um, was I I was dancing with my classmates. And there's sort of this like new move I was doing where I was like, I was just moving my arms like this and sort of really trying to feel the music and the energy. And I'd walk around to some of my classmates and I went in front of one of my brothers and I was like, oh, I, I, I could sense gratitude. So, I gave him a hug and um, then I went to another sister and I was just like, oh, I could feel her love. And then, I didn't think about it because I don't often have these really clear interpretations of people's energy. I usually just can feel like this energy feels good or this energy doesn't feel good, right? But then I walked up to another sister and I felt compelled to say, are you on the edge of like a new beginning? And she smiled. And then I was like, I, you're ready for bigger. You're ready for more. And then she said, you don't know how much I needed to hear that. And I was just so moved because I was like, I don't have a lot of interactions with her. I don't even think we had any classes together, to be honest. And so being able to share that connection with her in that moment was so special. And I was like, oh, something's happening. Like shifting in me, right? Perhaps another commencement or part of the commencement, right? And so then the third sort of big moment on the dance floor was having, it's like, wow, that felt so good. One of the things about my twin is that he has a background in ballroom dance and Latin dance. And so I've heard and he's talked about, just like how the community is like, and sometimes he'll share like when he dances, but we live at a distance, so I don't usually get to see him dance. Sometimes we'll just sort of, freestyle, which we were doing, which I was also very happy to witness because, again, knowing that his spirit dances, like I'm very happy anytime I see him dance. So, we're doing the thing where everybody's in a big circle and everyone's dancing, like no one's paired off. But there was a song or sort of this moment where he was like, oh, let's dance. So he like takes my hand and we're dancing. And at first he tries to show me like this is, when I do this, when I push you, I want you to like move back. And if I pull you, I want you to come forward. Can you sort of feel that difference? And I have to say, so my background, I've done a lot of choreographed dance, usually hip hop, right? And the dynamics of couples dancing is not something that I've ever felt comfortable with. In fact, the first time I learned how to salsa dance on my study abroad, my dance partner and I were having such a hard time that I fell off the dance floor. I think I was just like so resistant and like so tense that like he couldn't anything, right? And so subsequently after that, when I would try, I would take a semester Latin dance class and I was stiff as a board. And, a few years ago, I was trying some outdoor, salsa dancing, kind of feeling a little more comfortable, but still, a lot of it has to do with not knowing my dance partner, not being able to sort of trust like what's happening and being able to establish boundaries like energetically too, but also physically. And so we're back at reunion and after he sort of shows me that I'm like flowing and I think for like the first time like in a couple's dance with two people, right? But also because of the energy that I felt earlier in the dance circle with the kids and also with my classmates, it was, again, really blissful, right? Like just to be able to like flow. I'm often very resistant and very tense, right? And so it felt really magical to move and flow with the music and with him as my partner. And then it was so sweet because one of my classmates' daughters, she sort of like comes up around us right in front of us and then she goes like this. And then she like walks off. And I'm like, oh, wait, like, do you want to dance? Like, he can dance with you and he's a really good teacher. And she's like, no, I just want to watch you too. And then she like walks off. Right. And so it felt really affirming because generally speaking, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, in a couple's dance. And so these moments were just so beautiful. And all of these events and interactions and moments were amplified by my twin because he had visited one time. I'd taken him on an unofficial tour, but it was just him and I, and me showing like this is my favorite part of campus, and this is where I used to live, and these are the libraries. But he was like, it's his second time on campus, but his first time a part of these events and participating, right? And being able to see campus, being able to see the community and my classmates through his eyes was also so special because he was so grateful, he was so appreciative, and there was so much wonder, right? Just like, wow, I can't imagine, what it would have been like to be here, or like everyone's so welcoming and like it's so beautiful, like looking around the canyon or looking at the sky or like look at these buildings, right? And it's something that I take for granted because I'm there at least once a year. And as a student, I had a very different experience. And as an alumna, I had a very different experience for a long time. But this homecoming, right, was like amplified by his joy and his wonder and his appreciation. And it just made it even more wondrous and more magical to be there with him as we're interacting and going to these events and just like savoring. Like he would remind me, like, wow, like look at golden hour. The first night we had dinner outside. And I was like, oh, I just want to sit here. I don't care if I'm late for, the next event. Um, or like to be dancing and to like feel into my body, right, as we're dancing together with everyone. So it was so special. It was so perfect. We talked about it, the next day when we were leaving, and it was really hard to say goodbye to reunion in that space. It was really hard to say goodbye to like my classmates and those who were organizing the event, to say goodbye to my friends who I wouldn't see. But there were some friends that were going to stay around and that I would meet up with, right? And so we had lunch with a couple of friends before they had to leave for the airport. And then I got to spend some time with him and some of his friends who live um, near where I live before dropping him off at the airport and sort of processing and talking about like everything that had happened. And, you'd asked me, do you think having me there was helpful, or, do you think it like took away and detracted from it? And I was like, no, I think it was perfect. It was all so perfect. I couldn't have asked for anything better, maybe other than a better mattress. But there's some things you can't do anything about it. Um, it was just a really important moment in my, I think, journey, um, in all of the ways. On my twin soul journey, on my personal sort of like spiritual awakening journey, on my healing from feeling like an outsider as a student at my college. And so, really feeling that commencement piece and moving into that new era. And then the last thing that I want to share is I felt so honored and so grateful that my classmates and my sisters and my brothers were willing to let me be a part of and spend time and witness their families, because this is our second reunion, and more people have families, they have kids, they have spouses, they have partners. And I really enjoyed being Auntie Win Win. It is my auntie persona that I got to cultivate probably 10 years ago when one of my coworker slash friends um, invited me over to spend time with her twins. And because her husband called me Win Win, I became Auntie Win Win to the kiddos. And it was so incredible, right? Like I was telling you about dancing with the kids, that circle. But even in these like one on one moments with my friends' kids, I just felt, I felt like my capacity to love expanded in much the same ways that my twin soul journey has helped me open my heart and expand my capacity for love. One of my dear sister's daughters, who I'd seen, in a couple of video calls, um, and I just didn't really understand how real like a video connection can be, especially because that wasn't how I grew up and how I experienced like relationships and community. Um, but just some of the very sweet stories that I heard about being someone who's familiar to her daughter, even if that was the second day that we had physically been together and a few phone calls afterwards, so touching. And then being able to spend time at lunch with them before they, left for home, doing cartwheels with her and her husband, and just having like the ability to share space together was so precious. And I messaged my dear friend, my dear sister after, and I said, I miss you, and I miss your husband, and I miss your daughter. And she responded by saying, I felt that before I read your message, and I was thinking, like, it's hard, you know, to be far away from you. And that's what I felt. I didn't have language and capacity for it. And so, really grateful and excited to like embody my role as an auntie, and just never thinking that that would be something. And, that was one of the insights that I had when I was trying to prepare for my speech. I was like, it's never too late. Right. And so I know that was a really long winded update. So much in that it stemmed from so much before, possibly other lifetimes in parallel universes, and is going to really feed into a lot as well. But I wanted to share that because it's been so important and so vital. And I hope that if there's something that you're working through, or maybe something that you haven't ever considered, something working out, I I wonder what would happen if we gave it the possibility of, maybe it's not the right time yet, maybe the right time will come. What if there are possibilities we have not thought of, or even if we have thought of them, um, maybe there is something about timing. Maybe there is something about when we come into a certain energy, things might shift. And so, as someone who has spent 40 years of her life worrying and fearing and hiding from myself and my problems and other people, believe me when I say this is all new and unfamiliar for me as well. And somehow, in allowing for possibilities and allowing myself to look for opportunities, they're starting to present themselves. And so I'm not saying that you have to believe me. I'm not saying that you have to try it for yourself, but just wanting to share that maybe, or what if each moment has infinite possibilities? What if we each have infinite potential that we are still tapping into, and one choice can shift? What if? So I'll leave you with that. And I hope that my next update doesn't take as long as this one. If there's anything that you are curious about, feel free to leave it in the comments, or feel free to message me. You can look on the community tab for how to get in touch with me. But I am so happy that we were able to connect, and I hope that you take good care of yourself as you navigate wherever you are in your journey. And if there's anything I can do to support, please let me know. All right. Take good care. Talk to you next time. Bye bye.